I do work with male victims as well, and have worked with men who have experienced domestic violence, and they don't really it took a lot with one client for them to register what their experience was as abuse and domestic violence. They were like, this person hit me, this person would berate me and just talk to me horribly verbally, say all these horrible things. And I had to provide the psychoeducation of that is abuse. Like, if you were engaging in that kind of behavior towards your partner, how would you label it? And he was like, abuse. I was like, well, why can't you label your own experience about that? And he was like, well, I'm a man, that shouldn't happen to men. I can't label it as that.
Welcome to the Social Work Rants podcast, providing a platform for social workers to share their stories. The podcast covers a wide range of topics, including mental health, social justice, policy, and the day-to-day realities of the profession. Season 10 will continue to focus on the intersectionality of mental health and finances. Hope you enjoy. Hello, social workers, mental health professionals, and change agents. Welcome to another episode of the Social Work Rants podcast. I'm your host, Bas Moreno. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. I appreciate all the love and support. Gracias a todos por su apoyo. Welcome to another episode of Season 10, Year 5 of the podcast. This Follow the podcast on all social media outlets, on Instagram at the Social Work Rants Podcast. That is on one word, on Twitter, X, whatever President Elon decides to call it, at Social Work Rants. And the Social Work Rants Podcast, type it in on Facebook, aka Meta. Of course, hit that red subscribe button on the YouTube. And however you listen to podcasts, download episodes, share, leave comments, and tell me what you think of the episodes. So this episode is brought to you by Bas Moreno Consulting, providing financial education for people of color in the sandwich generation, talking about caregiving and the stresses of caregiving and finances. If this is you or you know somebody, go to basmorenoconsulting.com for more information. Definitely looking for clients to help out with their finances and just overall caregiving in 2025. My guest at this time, she's no stranger to the podcast, has been on the podcast before. A lot has changed since she's been on. Future doctor,
Here.
and that is one of the co-authors of the best-selling Latinx and Social Work Volume 3, the hottest book, especially social work in 2024. So if you haven't gotten a copy, make sure you get it. A lot of talented, amazing social workers in the book, and is juicy. It might be as juicy as Volume 2, but or maybe a little bit more juicy.
Yeah.
Natalie Gutierrez, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. I am tired because, as you mentioned, I'm a future doctor, so school just ended. I just turned in my finals, got my grades back, and then there was a book launch a couple weeks ago, and I was doing that while also doing finals. But it's over now. I can rest a little bit. I'm still working, of course, but I'm excited to have time off and to rest a little bit. But it was a hectic month. December has been very hectic so far, but I'm definitely doing very well. I think the book launch was a very moving, inspiring event, and it was so amazing to be a part of it, and to collaborate with everyone I collaborated with on the book, because everyone in that book is, like you mentioned, so talented. A lot of them I consider good friends, so it was definitely a great experience as well to have.
Yeah, the book launch was amazing. It was Erica got to share their story. It was definitely well organized. Shout out to Erica, the visionary of the book, and just
Yes.
kind of doing everything, putting everything together. So it was a great turnout. So it was good seeing everybody, and kind of got a support, and making a trip up from Delaware to come back home and deal with all the craziness of December in the city, but it was worth it.
Nice. Yeah, it was so nice that you showed up. I think you're one of the few like authors from previous books to be there, so that's very appreciated.
Nah, yeah, of course. You my peoples, and I gotta come support. And
Yeah.
that being said, for those who don't know who you are and what you do in the space, tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Natalie. I am a social worker. I graduated from Fordham in 2022. I went to their MSW program. Um, I do lots of things in social work. I have a podcast as well, which you came on a few seasons ago. I'm a doctoral student currently. I go to University of Kentucky's online program for the DSW. And I just recently started as well working in the space of supporting like survivors of gender-based violence. So that encompasses like domestic violence, sexual assault victims, human trafficking victims. And it's definitely like the work that I'm very passionate about doing. And aside from that, I've also worked in like being a therapist. I've been in a school-based setting as well. So I have a lot of like experience in social work, and I'm really excited for like the doctoral journey, and I'm in my first year, and next year I'll be in my final slash capstone year, which is when I'll be presenting kind of like the research that I'm going to plan on doing. So lots of things that I'm involved in and have my hand in social work, and that's what I love about the field, is that you could do so many different things at once. You just got to take it easy so you don't go crazy.
No, absolutely. Now, bef- before we get to the topic at hand, we are not going to downplay your podcast, which is also a top top 30 35 podcasts in all of social work. We're not going to do that do that to
Thank
ourselves. Congrats on that.
you.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. That's really awesome. I didn't know until you posted that. So I appreciate you for posting that. But yeah, it's an honor to be recognized on that list. And like, it's been growing, and I'm going to be airing my fourth season next month. So I'm very excited. I've had some amazing guests, and it's just been a fun experience. I've made a lot of friends, including yourself, from podcasting. So it's been really nice.
Yeah, it's no, I had a great experience coming on your podcast and sharing bits about my story and kind of the navigation of life and social work and the blending of everything that that encompasses that. So yeah. So um how did you well, let's talk about the book and the writing process and like I shared with you at the book launch when volume 2 came out. When I was writing, I was literally um looking for a new job. I was planning my wedding and writing my chapter for volume 2, and also figuring out how to release my poetry book all at the same time. So I was going to doing your doctorate program and writing your chapter like for you.
Oh man, it was a lot at once. I will say, when I did get like approached to do the book, the timeline was initially different, so I thought I was working on like a shorter timeline. Um, but what I did is like when I got approached for it, I wanted it to be very like raw and to like come straight from the heart. So I sat one day at my laptop and I was like, I'm not moving until this comes out. Like I'm gonna write this chapter and I'm gonna let it come from the heart. So I kind of treated it, I was like, let me treat this kind of like a journal entry and just like write about this experience from the heart and let it flow. And so I did, because I had an idea already about what I wanted to write about and the experience that I would be talking about, that I felt like would be most inspiring to share with the world and most like intentional. So I did that. I sat at my laptop one day and I just wrote my chapter and I turned it in, and it got like a couple edits, like really minimal edits, on like grammar and things like that, and some suggestions of things I thought I should add. But overall, like it stayed very true to that form of like when I first just sat there and wrote it. So I realized like this is something I needed to say. This was very therapeutic to like write the chapter, because it just poured out. I was like, wow, this is a story maybe I've been meaning to tell for a long time and like needed to be put out there. Um,
Mm,
but it was hard, I think, doing the book launch. I think for me, like the writing process felt very seamless, but the book launch, like that was 2 weeks ago. I was doing my finals and like in the middle of all of that. And then like writing your chapter is one thing, but talking about it in front of a room of people is
mm,
another. And I, of course, I ended up being the first author to speak on that night. Erica, that was messed up, but I get it. Love you, but you really put me on the spot there. I was the first author the entire night to speak, and it was like you could hear like a pin drop in that room. It was so quiet when
mm,
I was talking. So I think that was the challenging part, is like talking about the chapter then in front of
mm,
like hundreds of people, and the emotions that came with that and how real it felt there. Like everyone's going to read this now, like my story's
mm,
out there. um, but I'm glad I put that out there. I'm glad I was able to talk about it, and I think like writing my chapter has been very healing for me and like sharing my story.
That, no, you did a great job and so brave, not only writing what you wrote about, but talking about it and being put on the spot. I remember my book launch and which was also kind of simulcast on Facebook Live and like literally broke down crying in front of however many people was in person and on Facebook Live. So you kind of go back
You
and
can
kind
watch yourself
of
crying.
exactly. So it is what it is. So it happens, but yeah, it's out there and kind of all right. They kind of get that feedback, and now the obviously opportunities would come from speaking engagements or anything else that would come, and well, at least that's part of a goal or just continuing like the process. And obviously, you still got your grad school, um, your doctorate stuff to finish, and so more stuff to juggle.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle at once, but I'm excited for what the book is going to bring, and I think like it's helped me like I think like writing about my own experience being like someone who experienced sexual assault in college. I think it pointed me to where like I want to be in social work, and a lot of it is like supporting survivors. And so like it was just coming up everywhere for me. It felt like something I couldn't escape anymore. Like a lot of my clients were survivors of some kind of like violence. So I had so many clients that were victims of domestic violence or of sexual assault. I had so many family members that were victims of domestic violence, friends that were victims, and it just felt like it was everywhere for me. And I was being thrown into kind of predicaments with clients all the time where like these are the clients that I'm working with, that it ended up being a population that I was really good at supporting. And a lot of that is because of my own like lived experience with it. Like I lived it, so I kind of like I get it. Um,
Mm,
and so in writing the chapter and sharing my story, it all felt like very intentional, because I'm like this is the group of people, the populations that I like to work with, and it made it more clear kind of like the space that I want to be in social work moving forward. And like a lot of the advocacy and work that I do want to do is around like supporting victims of different forms of gender-based violence.
no, that's great. Do you get like any like at least when you first started doing that, any like kind of transference, counter transference, working with the clients initially?
Oh, absolutely. I am in therapy and will continue to be in therapy forever. I have supervision as well for that. Because it's a lot. Like sometimes clients aren't ready to leave abusive relationships, or there's just like because of the systems in place or their personal circumstances, they just can't afford to leave their abusive relationships. So, as a social worker or therapist in that situation, you can feel very like helpless. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
want to get this person out of this situation. But sometimes the client's not ready to do that or they can't do that. And so, like, in my setting where I work, sometimes there's clients who are like, they left the relationship and now they're homeless. They can't work because they don't have childcare or a place to live. And it's like, it's so much bigger than just a decision to end a relationship. It's about your livelihood, your housing, the
Mm-hmm.
security and care of your kids. And as we know, like, our systems, like applying for affordable housing, applying for childcare, those applications and to get approved can take like months on end, or you could just be put on a waiting list, especially in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say like, why don't you just leave this relationship, it really is like minimizing how difficult it is to leave, quite literally, with like the systemic challenges and also just like the trauma of the situation. Like, someone who's in survival mode and just like in an abusive relationship is just trying to survive every moment with their abuser and like trying to survive this relationship. So it's really difficult. And being like the social worker, always feeling like you want to do more, want to get the clients in a safe position, get them the resources they need, but having to remind yourself as a social worker that you're up against some really broken systems that take forever to get clients like the resources that they need.
No, absolutely, especially where anything related to social services immediately gets cut or to the point it becomes non-existent, and or you have uh, politicians who don't know the meaning of affordable housing, and then you see like nothing but like skyscrapers and like gentrification happening, and that New York City housing lottery, that's a joke as it is. So
Oh yeah,
it's,
absolutely.
and when you have a mayor acting a fool all day, every day. It's a lot for a regular person to kind of who's in a situation that needs help, and kind of at least, like you can only do so much because you know how the system is, and then you want to help, but the like you said, the system is not there to really help the clients when they need help the most.
Absolutely. And I think with a lot of the clients that I work with, they're navigating these systems along with like the emotional aspect and like having PTSD from like their abusive relationships, being sexually assaulted, or being victims of trafficking. So trying to navigate that and get the resources you need along with like dealing with trauma and all those things is a whole other added layer. And a lot of clients already have like a mistrust of people because of their trauma. And then they learn that they can't trust systems too, because I have so many clients that tell me, I called the police on my partner and they didn't do anything. Like, they just left us together in our home and told us to stay in separate rooms. So that's something that police officers tell victims, like, oh, just stay in a separate room. We can't remove your partner because they're also on the lease. So they legally have the right to be here, even though they're causing harm. And it's like, until they physically harm you, that is when they can be like arrested and you can press charges. So the system is very much like reactive rather than proactive. Where
Mm-hmm.
if you've seen that like someone's called already like 3 times saying like, my partner is throwing things, being verbally abusive and all these things, police officers don't say, okay, this is a major red flag, like, let's do something here to support this family, let's remove this person for the safety. It isn't until most of the time like the physical harm is caused that is when an arrest can be made and someone can be removed from the home. So there's a lot of, you know, clients that I work with that are navigating that, like having to live with their abusers because of the fact that they're just on the lease and the laws in New York City around that and like housing, and how police are just very dismissive when they do call in to make complaints or reports. And it shouldn't be that way, because if you call a police officer for help and they say, well, like, sorry, this person didn't physically harm you, I can't do anything, it's just like minimizing the abuse that a lot of people are facing. Just because it's not physical harm doesn't mean it isn't abuse. So it then in turn makes them like not trust the people that are supposed to protect them and the systems in place to protect them.
Mm. I know you mentioned about housing and the housing laws and stuff like that. The housing laws in New York are are a joke in so many ways for landlords. It really favors tenants. Like if you're on a lease, you got to really do something out of the ordinary to be kicked out. So um, but it's a lot happening all at once, and I know there's always police can only do so much based on the law, and it's it's just a lot of intertwined stuff that happens, and it's not just New York; it's throughout the country that stuff is happening. COVID kind of exacerbated like everything, and like even I'm sure there was like domestic violence happening, like, and you're like literally kind of stuck uh, with a partner because where everybody's inside thanks to COVID. So it's a lot in the aftermath of the pandemic, and people are really struggling.
Oh, absolutely. I think the pandemic definitely like made it very unsafe for like a lot of people in situations because like the world was shut down. A lot of people were at home with their abusers and in very like dangerous situations. And I think overall, I just always say like I know so many survivors, so many people who've experienced abuse that at this point like domestic violence is definitely like a public health crisis with how like frequent and it is and how many people like are abusers. Like there's abusers everywhere and it's really frightening and scary. And I think a part of it as well is kind of like the accountability aspect is I know like a lot of clients that they have order of protections and you know the abusive party continues to violate the order of protection and there's just like no consequences. um, and so like the lack of accountability on like law enforcement's ends of holding people accountable when they're breaking the law, breaking these order of protections, um, allows abusers to continue to do what they do. And I think also in social work, I think we need to see more people come in and do the work of like intervention for like the abusers as well. Like they need help. And it's hard because a lot of people that are abusive aren't receptive to help. But we do
Mm,
need more like intervention programs that are teaching kids from a young age, like these are the signs of abusive behavior. This is how you regulate your emotions. This is how you regulate your anger. These are coping skills and ways to deal with anger.
mm.
And providing more like education and resources around that. Because I personally could not do the work of working with abusers, but I think we do need social workers that lead those programs and like creating intervention to try to kind of like reduce the harm and also work with people who are causing the harm as well.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's just like the whole, like you said earlier, the whole system is broken. So it's just a lot of stuff that's intertwined within the systems that, and it's just meant to be broken, and it's kind of hard to really like to try as much as you want to fix it. It's just there's a lot that goes into try to fix it.
Absolutely. And it starts from like the individual level too, because some of it is like you tell like you know, you have a situation where you were in, where you were a victim of abuse or domestic violence, and you confide in someone and they don't believe you, or they say, like,
Mm,
I have clients that have told me, like, I opened up to my family members about, me suffering from abuse from my partner, and they told me, like, oh, well, this is verbatim. My client said, like, my family told me, like, you picked him, like, you made the decision to be with this person. So there's like the victim blaming, the lack of empathy for victims as well, and how that contributes to the problem because people aren't feeling safe to speak up when they're being told even by those closest to them like, well,
mm,
you chose to be with this person, or like this is your fault because you didn't see that this person was abusive. And very rarely does anyone see that a person is abusive at the beginning. Most people who are abusive tend to be very charming. They tend to be very loving and tend to like love bomb and actually provide you with so much love and physical affection. Um, and it's not fair to place the blame on victims, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like it does get talked about, but men can be victims too, and there's a lot of shame that goes into men reporting. They will look at it as being weak, and kind of like society like shames them for being abused themselves. So like I say, it's a lot that all intertwined.
Yes, I do work with male victims as well, and have worked with men who have experienced domestic violence, and they don't really like. It took a lot with one client for them to like register what their experience was as like abuse and domestic violence. They were like, this person hit me, this person would like berate me and just like talk to me horribly verbally, like say all these horrible things. And I had to provide the psychoeducation of like, that is abuse. Like, if you were engaging in that kind of behavior towards your partner, how would you label it? And he was like, abuse. I was like, well, why can't you label your own experience about that? And he was like, well, I'm a man, that shouldn't happen to men. Like, I can't label it as that. And that's when we come in as like social workers or therapists to kind of like help clients understand that's a myth. Like, you can experience domestic violence as a man. There's no restrictions to that. Anyone could be a victim. And that's another thing. Like, anyone can be a victim.
Mm,
Um, which is like we have like an image in our head of who victims are. Like, one of my clients even told me, she was like, no one thought of myself as a victim because I was like this successful woman. I had a great job, great career. I had everything together. But, behind closed doors, I was going through all these things. And then when I did confide in people, they said, well, you were smart enough to know better and you picked this person.
mm.
So it's just like humanizing it and knowing like anyone can be a victim. We have to be really empathetic. You also never know what people are going through behind closed doors or within their relationship. So it's important to always have that empathy.
No, absolutely. And I know when people think domestic violence, people think physical, also, financial, just like take manipulating situations that you're forced to stay home and like not being able to go to work to provide, and it's just or stealing credit cards or using like your social security number to open partner accounts on your partner's name, and there's a whole lot of different things like that. So it's not just physical and emotional as well.
Absolutely. And now we're in a virtual age where everything is done on social media. There's TikTok, there's everything. And there's cyber stalking and cyber abuse now. And that could look like someone, even if a partner is like blowing up your phone. And I've discovered this in working in my setting and like receiving training, like someone calling you like 50 times in a minute, like keeps blowing up your phone. That's considered abusive behavior as well, and they're using technology to try to assert power and control, and it's stalking in a sense as well. There's, like you mentioned, using people's financial information, trying to hack someone's like social media accounts, monitoring someone's social media accounts, knowing that they're not comfortable with that, um, and kind of going into detail about my experiences. So for me, aside from like sharing what I did in my chapter, I was also in a relationship that was abusive, that I left actually in the very last semester of my MSW program. So for me, a lot of it was experiencing those things. Like, once I decided to end the relationship, a lot of like retaliation took place. So I think that's another thing, is like what happens once the relationship is over. Some people are like, you just need to leave, but they don't realize leaving is the most dangerous time, and the
Mm,
abuse doesn't just stop there. So for me, this person was showing up to places that I was going to, um, using my financial information. So, like, I would see charges on my debit card that I would have to like, dispute with my bank,
Mm,
trying to hack my social media, monitoring my social media, emailing me, calling me nonstop. And like, you know, you would think like I made the decision to leave this relationship that was abusive. This should be like the breath of fresh air, and I should be having this like new start. I should be safe now. But really it intensifies often like after ending a relationship. And that's why a lot of it is a cycle. Abuse often operates in that kind of cyclical way that we learn.
mm,
Because in those moments, even myself, in those moments where I was being stalked, where I was being like retaliated against for my decision, I was like, well, maybe I should just go back because this is just as bad. Like,
right,
why did I leave if it's still going?
right,
And sometimes you want to, in that cycle, like to just appease that person and get them to stop. It feels like, victims tend to fall back into the
mm,
relationship, and then the cycle continues. So it's really so much more than just like leaving. I think like when survivors leave, they need so much support. They need so many things in place because it never just like stops there.
no, yeah, yeah, you said a whole lot right there.
Yeah,
That's why people need to go to therapy, and people really need to get whatever help they need, and just deal with the traumas that goes into things that you've experienced.
absolutely. Yeah, I think with domestic violence, it's often like there's a lot of generational trauma at play. So, with my experience in my relationship, that person grew up in a household with domestic violence. So they witnessed that. They were kind of exposed to that at an early age, and they didn't do work on themselves, and they ended up repeating the harm that they saw. So you're absolutely right in that therapy is such an important tool to navigating that trauma, because I feel like a lot of it stems from childhood, and like, a lot of people repeat the patterns that they see. And I think that particular person learns like you resolve your feelings of anger with like a physical action, and there's so many other ways that you can cope with and manage your anger. So it is really important because so many people end up suffering at the hands of a lot of people who don't do work and then cause harm.
Oh yeah, and like I said earlier, there's a lot of people causing harm, whether initially may not seem as intentional, then it becomes intentional, and it's just like I said, the cycle starts, and it's very difficult to break out of that cycle, and it's a lot that goes into try to break that cycle that needs to be broken.
Yeah. I think even like statistically, they say like it usually takes victims like 7 times of like that cycle or like abusive incidents to leave like a relationship. Like it takes 7 attempts to leave. For some people, it's more, for some people, it's less. No one is better than anyone else because of it. It's a difficult thing to navigate. That's one thing I've had to like work on for myself is like, why did I stay? Um, and kind of like forgive myself for that, but also recognize like it wasn't my fault. Staying was a part of
Hmm.
me surviving and like appeasing someone who was like harming me and, you know, scaring me to a point where I felt like, okay, I have to stay because leaving could be worse for me. So I think for a lot of like survivors, a lot of that then turns into like guilt and self blame that we have to work through after the fact, and navigate as well. So it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff that goes into like working with survivors, and so much that is experienced from these kinds of like traumas.
No, it definitely is a lot that goes into that, and that's what therapy is for. I know some you hit it hit home for me right now. You mentioned how no self blame and working on yourself. Like, that's been my healing this year to stuff that I've gone through and that I wrote a little bit about, and my chapter in volume two, and kind of all right, now it's time to heal those wounds and kind of move forward and kind of and deal with that.
Absolutely. I think my therapist put it beautifully one time. She was like, Natalie, if you gave that person so many chances and so much grace when they were causing you harm, why can't you, who was just trying to survive, give yourself grace? So that
Mm.
stuck with me. And I was like, wow, you're right. You're absolutely right. The grace that I extend to other people, I need to start to extend to myself as well and understand why I made the choices that I made.
Mm. Yeah, like my therapist told me, you did the best that you could under the situation you was given. So you gotta give yourself that grace. So it's been a work in progress, but I'm getting there.
Good. I'm glad.
Um, so so what are you working on with your doctorate? What are you trying to like get out of it?
So, excitingly, with my doctorate, I actually started kind of like I've been mapping out like what it's going to look like and what the end result and end product of my studies will be. So considering how like passionate I am about supporting victims and survivors, I will be using my capstone project, and I'm going to be launching kind of it's a nonprofit organization basically. It's like a program slash nonprofit that's going to be providing free services to survivors. So I'm very excited for that. A lot of it is going to be kind of like what I want to offer is mindfulness classes, yoga, Pilates, like sound bath, parenting classes as well to women who are trauma survivors or also like immigrant women because immigrant women also are coming with lots of trauma,
Mm,
hypervigilance. And when you've experienced so much trauma, I think what I've noticed from working with survivors that are also like mothers is that they're feeling like really guilty for their feeling like they can't be present for their kids. So part of the nonprofit would also be providing like parenting classes and bonding opportunities and classes for mothers to be able to, like build that attachment with their kids and be present with their kids. So I'm hoping to offer all those classes and workshops for free, as I've found in my own experience of healing that things such as yoga, Pilates, going to sound baths has been extremely healing for my nervous system. It's been really good for my overall wellness. And I think a lot of people who've experienced years and years of trauma could really benefit from these resources for free. So the nonprofit's going to be called Release New York City, as it's going to be based out of New York City. And I have a board appointed of all women of color, some who also identify as survivors, because I wanted this to be led by people within that community as well. And right now, I'm kind of in the process of like applying for funding and all those things to be able to hopefully like launch it over the summer and build my capstone out of it next year. And I'm just really excited to give back in the to the community in this way. So I'm trying to like get it off the ground and get it started. But this is the end result. Is like I want to have my own nonprofit to serve this community that I've been really like passionate about working with.
that's great. That's awesome.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
No, yeah, that's really great. Best of luck with that.
Thank you.
Um, so podcast. What's there to look forward to with that?
So yeah, with my podcast, we're coming back on January 13th with the first episode of the season. Very excited. I'll have weekly episodes every Tuesday. Um, my first episode's going to be about like somatic therapy, and I think that's a great like segue because that same week I'm going to be like announcing a lot of like the nonprofit stuff, and a lot of the work is going to be like somatic work in the nonprofit. So I'm excited for that. I have so many amazing guests lined up. Some of them are volume three authors. A lot of the podcast guests do all different kinds of work in the field. So I'm very excited for this next season and what it's looking like. But yeah, it'll be back on January 13th on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well.
You're not gonna do YouTube?
You know what? I've been getting told that I should do YouTube. And I think that's like a season 5 thing because I like to sometimes show up looking like a bum to recordings, like in my PJs, like hair up. And also my guests like to come comfortable too. Like it's great to come in as you are, like rolled out of bed and just like talk about what you want to talk about sometimes. But I think in season 5, like I'll get a setup and all that and I'll start doing like video recordings as well. Yeah.
Uh, I had to ask. Got to challenge you. Got to jump on the YouTube.
Yeah. No, it's
Well,
coming. It's coming.
because all these damn apps wants you to do video, and was like, pero coño, like all my listeners rather listen to the podcast instead of watching this. So it's like
Yeah, a lot of
it's
people like to
annoying.
listen. Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of people will listen to like episodes when they're driving and things like that or doing
Yeah,
other
exactly.
activities. So that's why I've been doing Spotify. It's been working for me, but I will get on video eventually.
But well, you could do video on the Spotify. You don't even have to change anything.
There we go. Yeah, so get ready. If you want to be on my podcast, you got to show your face now in season 5.
Uh, see, we got podcasters challenge each other and like elevate.
Yeah, no, we have to support one another. There's so many great podcasts out there. Paula has a great podcast, and I'm plotting to get on there. We were scheduling something. So, yeah, showing love to all the social work podcasts out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, all we got is us. We got to support each other.
Absolutely.
It's just making the time to listen to everybody. It was like
Right. There's so many. It's like, how do I make the time to listen to everyone? But I'm trying to
it's such, and my car don't have the capability to
play all
listen while I'm
at
driving. So I was like, the next car.
once.
Where can people find you?
So you guys can find me on Instagram. My tag is Healing Corner with Nat. I post stuff about my podcast. I post just like things about my life on there, updates, and I like to post like, my DSW journey as I'm going. As the nonprofit gets announced, I'll start initially announcing it on there. You guys can also reach me through email. It's the same as my Instagram tag, just at gmail.com. um, yeah, and I'm also like on the podcast is Tea Time Podcast on Spotify and also on Apple Music. So you guys can reach me through all those different platforms.
Cool. Need to tell Dr. J he needs to put the self-care tweets back on Twitter.
Yeah, I haven't ever talked to him. I'm like he's like a celebrity, so I'm scared to approach, but when I get the guts to do that, I will.
Uh, Always good to talk to you.
You as well. This was so fun. Thank you for having me again.